Hody Jones represents one of Eiichiro Oda's most thematically rich antagonists, despite being physically weaker than many of his counterparts. While not the most powerful or charismatic villain in the series, Hody serves as a perfect narrative device for exploring inherited hatred, baseless prejudice, and the consequences of generational racism, themes that resonate deeply both within the One Piece world and our own. Most if not all One Piece villains follow a predictable pattern. They initially overpower Luffy, forcing our protagonist to overcome seemingly insurmountable odds through determination, creativity, and newfound strength. Hody Jones, however, deliberately breaks this formula. As the first and only major antagonist, Hody was intentionally designed to be weaker than Luffy, serving as a showcase for how far our protagonist had progressed during his training with Rayleigh post-time skip. This subversion creates an interesting dynamic rarely seen in the series. Rather than Luffy being the underdog and Hody as the overmatched fighter, it's the other way around, with Hody desperately trying to keep up. As one Reddit user aptly described, "I remember by the finale of the fight, I thought to myself, damn, I finally understand how Crocodile felt when fighting Luffy." This role reversal doesn't make Hody less compelling. It makes him narratively distinct and purposeful. His weakness compared to Luffy is not a storytelling flaw, but a deliberate choice that enhances the thematic elements of the Fishman Island arc. What truly distinguishes Hody Jones is his infamous answer when asked what humans had done to him personally to inspire such hatred.
"What did humans do to you that was so unforgivable? Why? What in this world could inspire such cruelty?"
Nothing. This single-word response represents one of the most powerful moments in the series, revealing that Hody's racism isn't based on personal experience, but rather on inherited prejudice. Hody and his companions were shown as impressionable children, listening to Arlong's racist speeches, becoming indoctrinated by hatred passed down through generations. As Fukaboshi later observes elderly Hody and his officers spouting the same prejudice, he says, "Be quiet. I don't want the children to hear." Highlighting the cyclical nature of learned hatred, Eiichiro Oda specifically created Hody to highlight baseless racism in both the One Piece world and our own reality. Hody's connection to Arlong represents one of the most fascinating aspects of his character. Despite never having personally met Arlong, Hody idolized him and internalized his ideology to an extreme degree. Where Arlong was willing to work with humans, albeit as second-class citizens, and never harmed fellow fishmen, Hody only accepted humans as slaves and showed no hesitation in murdering fishmen who sympathized with humans. This shows Hody isn't just a copy-paste Arlong. This relationship demonstrates how hatred can intensify as it passes through generations. Arlong's prejudice, born from actual experiences with human cruelty, transforms into Hody's more extreme, indiscriminate hatred without personal justification. This progression makes Hody a fascinating study in how bigotry can evolve and intensify over time. Despite his relative weakness compared to Luffy, Hody showed remarkable strategic planning. For years, he operated from the shadows, systematically undermining efforts at human-fishman reconciliation. He assassinated Queen Otohime to sabotage peace negotiations, stole and reproduced energy steroids from the palace, and gradually built an army of 100,000 fishmen. His calculated approach stands in contrast to more impulsive villains. Hody didn't just want power for its own sake. He wanted to reshape Fishman Island according to his ideology. This methodical plotting demonstrates that physical strength isn't the only measure of a formidable antagonist. I'm not going to glaze him and say he's the perfect villain. Hody's base design may not be as immediately striking as villains like Kaido or Doflamingo, perhaps not even as good as Arlong, who had that iconic nose of his. But his transformation after overdosing on energy steroids created a visually impactful character evolution. His skin turned white, his muscles expanded dramatically, and he embodied the monstrous nature of his ideology. Sure, there are countless other villains with better evolutions, but remember, he's supposed to be a street-level villain, or in this case, underwater villain. He is not supposed to be that major that he's stronger and better looking than emperors and warlords, but he's also supposed to be major enough to own the whole Fishman Island saga. So Oda does very well balancing this intricacy. His durability was especially noteworthy. He repeatedly survived powerful attacks from Luffy, including Haki-enhanced Gear 2 techniques and even the devastating Red Hawk. This resilience created a frustrating opponent who refused to stay down despite being outmatched. A trait we've seen mostly in heroes, best portrayed by our very own Luffy. What ultimately makes Hody one of One Piece's most significant villains is his thematic purpose. He represents the darkest possible version of inherited will, a central concept in the series. While Luffy inherits the positive will of figures like Roger, Ace, and Shanks, Hody inherits Arlong's hatred. Indoctrination is something anyone could be subject to without even realizing, and since the root stems from so far back, reversing it is like trying to put toothpaste back into the tube. Through Hody, Oda provides a powerful commentary on real-world prejudice, and I want to tie that in with a quote from the Bible. "An eye for an eye makes the whole world blind." Yes, it's unfair to the victims of injustice, but it's about what you do next to deal with it. Will you hold a grudge, choose violence, and blame the entire race, or would you do something about it so others don't have to go through the same thing? It's what shaped leaders like Martin Luther King. Hody Jones may not rank among the strongest or most beloved villains in One Piece, but his significance lies in his thematic purpose rather than his battle prowess. He represents a realistic portrayal of how hatred perpetuates itself, how prejudice can exist without personal justification, and how each generation can inherit and intensify the worst aspects of their predecessors. This, along with his unique underdog status, cements him as a fresh new take of a One Piece antagonist, which for me is enough to make him the best villain.